So I'm just gonna share my screen here really quickly. Okay, so I am going to be leading us in a workshop that I call Contemplative Peacemaking. And if you can't see all of the slide, you can just minimize my little talking head there at the top or click on the different settings, I think. So if you're having trouble seeing, you can just kind of change your viewing settings up there. But before we kind of continue into this workshop content, just kind of picking up on the theme John talked about a little bit about us being in these post-lunch times. I again want to affirm and continue to give permission for you to do whatever your body needs to do. If you need to stand, to walk around. This is, sometimes our brains aren't able to focus or listen as well if we really try to force ourselves into this seat as hyper-focused kind of position. So feel free to move around, to eat. No bad manners here, or no such thing, I guess, as bad manners here. But before we dig into the content, I would just love for us to just take a deep exhale and a deep inhale. And just see if we can kind of imagine our mind, our body, and our spirit all coming into alignment in this exact moment. And so whether that's with your eyes closed or your eyes open, just kind of release all of the chatter that might be going on in your head. And let each breath just kind of anchor you a little bit more here into this precious moment that we're sharing together. All right, thanks everyone. So I'm going to be popping my slides on and off here a little bit, trying to minimize them, but pulling them up for some key moments. And so what is contemplative peacemaking, you may ask? I wish I totally knew the answer to that. I'm still very much on my journey of trying to explore that. But I will start with this that John talked about earlier in his conversation about everyday peacemaking. And he talked about these 4 peacemaking practices: see, immerse, contend, and restore. And we often say that if we take seriously Jesus's teachings, Jesus's call for us to be peacemakers in the world, our life is really anything but peaceful. But I think that we can often see peacemaking as moving towards conflict in areas of brokenness in our external worlds and communities, and trying to bring restoration into those places, which is a beautiful and incredibly necessary posture to have in the world. But we often forget that that peacemaking also needs to be part of our interior and personal practice. That we need to, with the same intentionality that we see, immerse, contend in the world around us, we must see, immerse, and contend into ourselves, that we must move towards the brokenness in our own selves, our own spirits, before or in tandem, at least in tandem with moving towards the brokenness in our context. And so I think we thought that this workshop would be really important for this summit. You know, we're here talking about the realities of the border. And so it might feel like a little bit of a left turn to kind of go into this spiritual territory. But I think that something that I know we've seen organizationally, and I'm sure many of you have either personally experienced or seen in your ministries and contexts, is that we are surrounded by so much brokenness. And that somewhere along the way, I feel like within the Christian tradition, we were sort of groomed to believe that caring for others is, especially at the detriment that we care for others at the detriment of caring for ourselves. Or that, you know, we hear all of these sort of, it's very zeitgeisty, very like hip to talk about self-care, but it can feel indulgent. It feels like, oh, that's a privilege. That's a privileged thing to be able to take care of yourself. Or possibly, you know, it sounds like there are a lot of people on this call as I'm kind of like engaging with the chat and hearing people share. There's a lot of people who are very aware of the privilege that you are carrying in your context, the different parts of your identity that give you privilege in different ways. And sometimes when we're awakened to that privilege, it's also accompanied by shame. Perhaps shame at ourselves for how long it took us to have our eyes open to the pain of others. And so perhaps instead of tending to ourselves and integrating that shame as a part of our experience, we try to stay one step ahead of it. We run in front of it. Or perhaps in our work on the border or in issues of justice, we don't trust that we're partnering with God in this work of restoration. And we feel that if we stop for even one moment, the pain or suffering that we see around us is we are responsible for. It's because we didn't do enough. And I've seen this in my own life. I mean, I could tell you about my own burnout at age 25, and that was a really depressing moment because I know without a shadow of the doubt that I was put on this planet to pursue healing and wholeness. And so if at 25 I was burned out, what was I going to do for the next 75 years of my life? Knock on wood, I live to be 100. I've got some pretty good genes in my family. And that's what really catalyzed me onto this path of contemplative peacemaking, because I saw so much of my world focused on external peacemaking or so much of my world focused just on navel gazing, meditation, and not that integration of both of them. And if we don't integrate the contemplation and the action in the world, I think worst case scenario is burnout, which I'm sure we've all experienced at some point. Or I'm sorry, best case scenario. Best case scenario is burnout or moral failure. We see so often people in leadership or people moving at these unsustainable paces, having these really huge falls from grace, and we wonder why. I would argue there's not a balance of that, of the interior and the exterior peacemaking. So that's best case scenario. I think worst case scenario is we create really toxic environments in our ministries, in our organizations, in our churches. And worst case scenario is we recreate the systems of oppression that we are actually trying to dismantle. Thomas Merton talks about, Thomas Keating, I get my Thomases confused sometimes, says we have to disarm the violence in ourselves if we want to disarm the violence in our world. But we often focus so much on disarming the violence in the external world that we don't realize that our interior violence is contributing to the exterior violence. Yes, are we following? How are we feeling? How are we feeling here? I wish we could all be in one room together one day.
Helpful.
So sometimes I get ahead of myself in my notes. So I'm just going to peek over here to my other screen, see where I'm at. Okay. So another way of kind of thinking about this exterior and interior peacemaking is what I think of this balance of doing and being. And I often come back to Matthew 22, where Jesus is asked, what is the greatest commandment? And I think we all are probably pretty familiar with this passage. So Jesus asks, what is the greatest commandment? And he replies, the most important is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then the second, which is very similar, is to love your neighbor as yourself. And so I see those as that calling into the doing and the being, that the very first, the most important commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And many wisdom teachers throughout the Christian tradition have said the path towards knowing God is through knowing self. Thomas à Kempis says that a humble self-knowing is a surer way to God than a search after deep learning. St. Augustine writes that, grant, Lord, that I may know myself, that I may know thee. And so loving God with all our heart, soul, and mind includes, maybe not limited to, but includes this deep knowing of self. And then the second is loving your neighbor. So from this deep place of loving self and loving God outpours the ability to love our neighbors. And so we're going to actually break out into some breakout groups here in a moment and just start with a few questions. We're actually going to be in these breakout groups reoccurringly. We'll do it twice in this workshop, and then we'll also come back to them in the next workshop and towards the end of our gathering. So this is going to be a little pod of people that you will get to hopefully get to know and get to spend some more time with throughout our afternoon. And so I want to start just by laying out some group processing agreements. What am I sharing here? Am I not sharing the right thing? Hold on, screen share. That doesn't, can you see? Can you see that? It's not coming up for me. Hold, please.
We saw it briefly.
Oh, sorry.
We saw it briefly and then it went away.
Oh, you did see it. Oh, fantastic. Okay. So you can see, is this showing my PowerPoint?
No, you need to switch to another window that you're sharing. We're seeing your Zoom window.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing as well. All right. Well, oh wait.
Sometimes if what you want to share is like halfway behind your screen, you run into trouble.
Oh, there you go. That might be what's happening. I also have a dual monitor situation, which is great, but maybe in this scenario is working against me.
So do you have the document you want to share on the other monitor?
I have it now, I think, pulled up on both. So let's.
Good luck.
Oh no, it's still not seeming to share. Okay.
Now we can see what was going to be a slideshow. It just hadn't loaded yet.
Okay. Let me just roll with this because I don't feel that this is being very helpful. So I will just, I can put them into the chat. And then if this ends up deciding to work, we will come back to it. So these are our group processing agreements, and I will, I'll explain each one. So the first is to speak from the heart. And we say that just because don't overthink what you are going to share. Don't wait until you have the perfect words. We want to show up as ourselves. So just whatever God is putting on your heart to share, speak freely. Yeah, don't overthink or be fearful of what you feel like you need to contribute. The second is to be lean of expression, which is a nice way of saying do not dominate the conversation. If you know that you're a chatter, which is great, and we love you for that, we also want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to share in these breakouts. There'll be about 3 to 4 people, and the breakout will be 10 minutes long. So you can do the math there. That's like 3-ish minutes per person to share. So we have to make sure that we are lean of expression. Doesn't mean that you can't talk, but just means be mindful. And I'll also be sending out, or Gwen will be sending out reminders of how long we have. And then our third agreement is what I call no cross-talking, which is very counterintuitive, but it's basically just not referencing what other people in the group share. And that's a way for us to keep it a safe and a brave space. And by not referencing, I mean, like, say that I am in a group and I share something, and then someone else says, oh yeah, just like Hailey, I also feel really angry when I see X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, I didn't say I felt angry. And now I feel like you're not really listening, or I feel misunderstood. And we just want to do our best to create spaces where we can each show up in the way that we need to without feeling like we're being judged or misunderstood by those in our group. So no cross-talking means just share what you need to share and then let the next person share. And we don't necessarily need to be commenting on what other people are sharing. So speaking from the heart, be lean of expression, and no cross-talking. So our first breakout group here, again, will be about 10 minutes. And here are the questions that I'd love for us to discuss. So first, just simply introduce yourself, your name, where you're calling in from, just a real brief introduction. And then secondly, do you resonate more as being a doer or a beer? So do you feel yourself being pulled or naturally more of someone who focuses on that interior or someone who focuses on the exterior? And then where do you see that tendency in your life? How do you know that about yourself? So again, I'll put these into our breakout groups, or if you want to take a screenshot here or write them down, those are our agreements. Those are our questions. And Gwen, whenever you're ready, feel free to put folks in their breakout groups.
Thank you. I am ready. I have tried hard to have our Spanish speakers in a room together. If I have placed you in the wrong room, just leave the room and come back to the main Zoom call and I will figure it out. Here we go.
Is this our group?
You arrived late, Deanne.
Sorry.
Let me see if I can, where I can put you.
You can put her in mine because I'm in breakout room 24.
All right.
But I'm gonna I came back so I can try to figure out my screen situation.
No, okay, how am I gonna do this? How do I do this? Deanne Rios.
Looks like Erica needs one too.
It kicked me out instead. It said it was sending me to room 8 and then it just kicked me out.
Gwen, I'm fine if you don't add me to one. Either way is fine.
I'm not sure I know how to do it.
Okay.
Because now it's just asking me if I want to join. So why don't the three of you become a group?
I was going to try to figure out my screen share situation.
Okay, then why don't Deanne and Erica become a group?
Okay. Sounds good. Oh, I've got a third one. People are joining. On too. Okay, my husband called when the questions were being named. So I
just put them in the chat.
Okay, great. Perfect. I will look at them now.
There's like 12 people here.
Oh, really?
There are probably people who are not at their, oh no, there are some people. There's also probably a lot of people who are not at their desktop.
This feels very weird to me.
Oh, here I can assign.
I don't want to participate. I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Gwen, I was assigned a breakout room, which is fine, but it just got stuck on the like loading screen, and people could see me, but that I was there, but I could not speak or see them.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. But so I thought I would leave and come back. If it's helpful, it was breakout room 22. I'd be happy to go back there.
Let me see if I can.
Gwen, I just left group number 6 and Janine Scanoni is in it with Joanna Leslie, and it's only the two of them, and they say they know each other very well. So I think they needed more people added to it. To number 6.
John Leach, are you looking to be in a group? Can I assign you to room 6? Give me a thumbs up if yes.
Great.
And Deanne, where would you like to go? Let's see.
Whatever you think. I honestly don't know what group.
Drop you in room 5.
Okay.
Hopefully that'll work. This is making my head hurt.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can.
Hi.
Hi.
I was having trouble with my settings and my voice and my photo, but I've gotten that all organized. So I would love to go back to the breakout group that I was assigned to.
Do you know anyone's name in it?
No, they were just sort of getting started, and I realized I wasn't able to talk and they couldn't see me. It doesn't really matter to me which group.
I'll give you a new one then.
Okay.
And Gwen?
Yes.
Same with me. This is Julie.
Hi, Julie. I will put, why are there 2 of you, Julie? Oh,
I don't know. Are there two now? I think
no.
I was on my phone and my iPad. For some reason, I can't get the camera. Well, it keeps saying that Zoom doesn't have access to my camera, but when I go into privacy settings, it says it does. So I don't know what.
All right, I'm going to put Marjorie, Julie, and Jill Henderson, who I also see here, in a new room called Room 2.
Okay, room 2.
Oh, yes. Ooh.
I will send it to you right now. Okay, so I clicked on her name. Go to English.
English.
And then manage language.
There you go.
And then unfortunately Zoom doesn't detect her, so you need to add her. So search by name. Sorry. There you go. Ta-da. And then update. That's it. Oh.
I got disconnected from my new group with Julie.
And Julie is asking for help too. So let me see here. You wish these things, I'm going to try it again, and then I'm going to join you in breakout room 2, and we're almost done.
Hello.
Welcome back, everyone. We're going to be slowly trickling back as folks either finish their conversations or get kicked out of their breakout rooms, whichever comes first. And so we'll give them a few more seconds for everyone to populate back here. While people are coming back and joining, feel free to put into the chat if you feel comfortable. You don't have to if you don't feel comfortable, but you could put in the chat if you identify more as a doer or a beer. Which one kind of resonated more with you? Okay, we've got a little bit of diversity here, which is great. I find myself, feel like I was groomed into the doing. And then once I discovered kind of the contemplative, I just was like, oh, dove fully into just the being. And now I'm learning how to integrate the both, but it can sort of be a pendulum swing sometimes. All right, I think we have everyone back with us. So I hope that was a helpful time of connection, getting to connect a little bit more, process. And again, we'll be back with these groups a little bit later on in this gathering. So as we think about this balance of doing and being, I often think about, or honestly, when I come to these places in my life where I'm overcompensating on the doing, because I mean, quite honestly, if you were raised here in the United States, we are a culture of doers. Our value is often ascribed by what we do. We're compensated by what we do. There's very little emphasis or incentive To be a human being, there's very much an incentive to be a human doing, I guess. But I come back to also in Matthew, but earlier on in Matthew 3, is the story of Jesus's baptism, where he's baptized by John the Baptist. And I'm just going to read a section from Matthew 3. It says, as soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, this is my child, whom I love, upon whom my favor rests. So again, a voice from heaven said, this is my child, whom I love, upon whom my favor rests. And keeping in mind that this is before Jesus started any of his ministry. And I come back to that a lot, not as an excuse to not do anything, but as a reminder that my belovedness, the way that God sees me, has nothing to do with what I do and everything to do with who I am. And so I think that in a country where our cultural capitalism and our cultural Christianity often are toxically intertwined, we have this idea that to earn the favor of God, we must do. We must earn that love. We must earn that favor. But this passage in Matthew, before Jesus even started his ministry, is a reminder that we are beloved children of God, that God's favor rests on us before we ever do anything in this world. But I know that a lot of you have these deep wells of passion to be doing things in the world. And that, I think, is incredibly beautiful and incredibly necessary. And so I want to spend this next section talking about more like how do we bring those being and those doings into balance? And so earlier I referenced the 4 practices, our 4 peacemaking practices that we talk about at Global Immersion: see, immerse, contend, and restore. And I want to talk through and work through each one of those together today. So I believe that I got my screen share situation figured out. Loading. So see. In contemplative peacemaking, define this as contemplative peacemakers see the humanity, dignity, and image of God in themselves. And so you may remember earlier when John was going through these practices, and so these are slightly different definitions. John's talking about this peacemaking external, and these practices are the internal peacemaking. And so when we talk about the external peacemaking, we say that peacemakers see the humanity, dignity, and image of God in everyone. And we often bring attention to who have you been taught to see and not see? How have you been taught to see certain communities? How have you been taught to not see certain communities? But in the contemplative peacemaking, we take that seeing practice and we turn it inwards. And we say, how am I? How do I see the humanity, dignity, and image of God in myself? And so I'd encourage you to think about a few questions, and you could even jot these down as journal prompts or questions to think about maybe on a walk later. But how have I been taught to see myself? How have I been taught that God sees me? How might my presence or my practice in the world be different if I believed that God's favor rested on me? So every day, our contemplative peacemakers We ask ourselves the questions that guide us towards a better understanding, a more truer and holistic understanding of how God sees us. Secondly, immerse. Contemplative peacemakers immerse into their interior worlds with regular contemplative practices. And contemplative practices have a deep, deep, beautiful history within the Christian tradition. And they mostly incorporate one or all elements of silence, solitude, and or stillness. And Mother Teresa said that we listen in silence because your heart is full of other things. Like when your heart is full of other things, you can't hear the voice of God. And so we immerse into our interior worlds. We create this time for contemplative prayer so that we can empty ourselves of the chatter and the chaos that we are inundated with, and actually create space to hear from God. And I come back to this writings from St. Augustine where he says, "Grant, Lord, that I may know myself, that I may know thee." It's through contemplative practices that we actually learn who we really are, where we hold a mirror up to ourselves and see ourselves more clearly, more fully. And contemplative practices can look like so many different things. You know, you have your very traditional contemplative practices like centering prayer, contemplative walks, Lectio Divina, chanting, contemplative journaling, welcoming practice or prayer. There's many of these contemplative prayers and practices, again, that are part of this ancient stream of the Christian tradition. But I also want to suggest that we can have everyday contemplative practices. That yes, in a dream world, we can all carve out this silent time to spend with the divine. But it's also contemplative peacemakers in this everyday life can also see those little windows of time to spend with God when we're making the bed or we're walking the dog. How can we integrate stillness, silence, and or solitude into an everyday thing that we do, into washing the dishes or cleaning the house or rocking our children to sleep? How can we regularly immerse into our interior selves so that we can see, know ourselves better, and hear more clearly the voice of God? The next practice here is contend. So we have see, immerse, contend. Contemplative peacemakers move toward their impulses and motivations with curiosity, compassion, and love. Contemplative peacemakers move toward their impulses and motivations with curiosity, compassion, and love. To me, this is the peacemaking practice. I mean all of them, but I think this is really where we can create a lot of accountability for ourselves in our external peacemaking process. So I think of this call that I got. I'm gonna stop my screen share here for a second. John referenced earlier the border crisis that happened in 2018, where there was this flood of migrants at the border, and obviously the border was completely, the infrastructure was completely overwhelmed, and it drew the national attention, as I'm sure you all remember. And our organization being very centralized in San Diego, just a lot of people were reaching out to us and asking, how can we help? How can we help? And I mean, I was getting just like Facebook messages from people I hadn't talked to since middle school. And somehow I got this call from this woman that I do not know at all. Somehow she got my cell phone number. She called me. She was like, I'm in my minivan. I'm driving to Mexico with a van full of toys. Do I need a passport? And where should I go? And I was like, whoa. There's just like a lot happening here. And I just said, stop your minivan. Do not turn your minivan around. Don't go to Mexico. And maybe that was a bit of a harsh reply, but to me, this woman was not doing any internal contending. So when we feel moved into action, this is not a bad thing, but contemplative peacemakers notice what is moving us into action and interrogate that before we act. So why was this woman packing her minivan full of toys and driving down to Mexico, where she clearly doesn't know anything about if you don't know that you need a passport, and doesn't know anybody there to give toys to if she's calling me a complete stranger to ask what she's supposed to do? So interrogating what is the motivation there. And I'm not saying it's a bad motivation. However, it's these good motivations with bad practices that lead to a lot of really terrible situations that we see happening in our border, of well-intentioned people crossing the border and creating a lot of dependency and dehumanizing activity or programs because they just feel bad. And then they act out of that I feel badness. Instead of contending with themselves, what is my motivation? And how can I move toward my goal with more integrity or with more context? Am I being motivated out of a place of ego, or out of a place of fear, or out of a place of shame, instead of out of a place of relationship or of wholeness? So there's a lot of ways that this contending with ourselves comes into play. It might be something as kind of overt as that, or it might be just noticing your impulses of jealousy, or of wanting recognition, or of wanting to be seen a certain way. Contemplative peacemakers notice those impulses and motivations, but we don't then go into shame spirals about them. We approach them with curiosity. Where is this coming from? With compassion, understanding that we're not perfect, and with love. And that allows us to move forward on more sound footing. So contemplative peacemakers move toward their impulses and motivations with curiosity, compassion, and love. And I'd actually come back to the breath prayer that we did together this morning, where we breathe in, holy wisdom, guide me. Holy wisdom, guide me. And then our last practice, restore. So contemplative peacemakers partner in the restorative work of God from their own place of healing and wholeness. So when we are able to dismantle the violence on the inside, we're able to partner with God in dismantling the violence in our world from a true place of healing and wholeness. And again, none of us are perfect, and we're all going to make mistakes. But I think that these practices can help us really take seriously and really, what's the word I'm looking for? With the right level of gravity, the impact that our actions have in the world, and the impact that our interior selves have on our exterior actions. This is also the step where we are our love of self, our love of God overflows into our love of neighbor. It's like we're these engines or these cars where when our tanks are full on this on the love of God, that is able to overflow into and empower our love of neighbor work that we do in the world. And so we're going to hop out into discussion groups just one more time. And this will be shorter. We'll have about 5 minutes here, and we'll just end with one question. So everyone just go around the circle here in this discussion group and answer one question. What is one contemplative practice? And so maybe again, it's a traditional practice of prayer or contemplative walking, but also being realistic if you're a young parent or I don't know, you're working 60-hour weeks. Perhaps there's a way that you can turn an everyday rhythm into a contemplative practice. So what is one contemplative practice that you can integrate into your daily routine? And so again, we'll have about 5 minutes to do that, and we'll break out into our groups right now. Welcome back, everyone. And we're going to be transitioning here into our second workshop that Jer Swigart will be leading. But while we're waiting for everyone to come back in and making that transition, I would love for folks to put into the chat what is the practice that you're going to try to integrate into your day. I will say mine out loud because I am unmuted. I was just this week realizing that I always multitask when I'm eating. I'm reading the news or I'm listening to the news or a podcast. And so the practice I'm trying to integrate is contemplative eating, is eating my meals without distraction. So I'll also put that into the chat.